I was in my office, sifting through emails, when my cell phone rang. It was my younger brother, the one who'd left for Hawaii years ago to open his own boutique hotel. The late hour made the call unusual, so I answered quickly. There was no greeting, just a blunt question. "Where's your wife?" I gave the obvious answer. "She's in New York. A 3-day business trip, accompanying her boss to a series of conferences." A silence followed that chilled me to the bone. Then the final blow. "No, she's not. She's here, at my hotel, and she didn't come alone." My first thought was that it had to be a mistake, a simple case of a look-alike. But within seconds, my brother sent a photo on WhatsApp. It was her. She was wearing the blue dress she'd asked me to buy for her weeks ago, holding hands with some burly man, laughing as if they were on their honeymoon. There was no room for doubt. To top it all off, they had checked in using my credit card, the very same one I used to cover her trips, her dinners, even her whims. The blow was so precise I had to lean against my desk to keep from staggering. My brother, his voice restrained, told me everything. How she had arrived smiling, asking for the best room with an ocean view. How she had booked a massage at the spa and toasted with champagne, all on her husband's tab. In that instant, I moved from shock to absolute cold. I didn't ask for emotional details. I asked for concrete proof, receipts, invoices, check-in records. I told him to save everything, every document and every frame from the security cameras. My brother understood immediately and assured me he would keep it all under lock and key. I hung up and stared at the screen, the photo still open. I remembered her words before she left, that she'd be working late, that she'd be too busy to call often, that I shouldn't worry if she didn't answer my texts. Each excuse suddenly clicked into place, like pieces of a puzzle I had refused to assemble. And the worst part was the feeling of being a fool. While I was covering for her, she was parading around with another man, using my money on an island where my own brother could see her. I didn't explode. I didn't immediately call to scream at her. Instead, I turned off the office lights, closed the door, and took a deep breath. I understood that this betrayal deserved more than an outburst. It deserved a plan. I wouldn't give her the spectacle of a wounded husband, but the surgical coldness of someone who knows how to wait. That night, as the city went dark, I was already plotting the first steps of her downfall. I barely slept. Scenes I had previously overlooked replayed in my mind. The sudden work trips, the new perfume she claimed to have bought on sale, the uncomfortable silences when her phone would ring and she'd leave the table to answer. It all took on a new, sinister meaning. I turned on my laptop and reviewed my account statements. The charges matched everything my brother had described. Dinners at the hotel's most expensive restaurant, a couple's massage, shopping sprees at luxury boutiques, all charged to my card, all spent as if I were her sponsor. I asked my brother not only to save the invoices, but, if possible, to authorize complimentary upgrades to their stay. I wanted my wife and her lover to believe everything was perfect, that they were enjoying a paradise at my expense. The more they spent, the better. Every drink, every excursion, every detail added to the mountain of evidence. Let them feel like kings, I told him. Tomorrow, their reign ends. He understood and agreed. even making sure they had the largest suite to make them feel comfortable. Meanwhile, I replayed past conversations. I remembered how she used to mention a coworker, the same one I now saw in the photo. She always spoke of him in a casual tone, saying he was very professional and overly kind. In my naivety, I had interpreted it as simple camaraderie. Now I knew that every time she had uttered his name, she had been carving the lie onto my forehead. I bit my tongue in rage, but I didn't let that fury distract me from what had to be done. I decided to contact a trusted lawyer. I told him everything with cold precision. The confirmed suspicion, the evidence on its way, the need to prepare an ironclad divorce with no compensation for her. My lawyer advised patience. The more I could prove she used my money to finance her affair, the stronger the case would be. He told me not to block the card just yet. Give her enough rope, he said, until she was tangled in the evidence. I turned off my personal phone, leaving only the email I used to communicate with my brother and my lawyer active. I didn't want her to call. I didn't want her voice to shatter my resolve. That night, while she enjoyed my money on a paradise island, I had already decided on something far more cruel. I would let her dig her own grave. With every purchase, with every smile she thought was innocent in front of the hotel cameras, her fall would be public, legal, and devastating. The next morning, with all the evidence backed up in emails and cloud folders, I made my first move. I froze the credit card. I knew the impact would be immediate. Just a couple of hours later, my phone rang. It was her. I answered calmly. The first thing I heard was her hysterical tone. Honey, it seems there's a problem with the card. It's not going through. Did you call the bank? I feigned surprise. I asked her to repeat what she had said, and when she did, I delivered the final blow. I know you're in Hawaii, at my brother's hotel, with your lover. You no longer have access to another cent of my money. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by her ragged breathing. She tried to improvise a lie, claiming it was a misunderstanding, that she was on a work trip staying with colleagues. My response was to instantly send her the photo my brother had sent me, the one where she was laughing, holding her lover's hand with a glass of champagne in the other. She couldn't sustain the lie. She went from denial to pleading in seconds. Let me explain. It's not what you think. Give me a chance. I hung up without giving her another moment. That same afternoon, my brother sent another series of photos. In one, my wife appeared alone, sitting by the pool, her face a mask of despair. The lover had vanished. She had tried to use the card again, and when it failed, she was left stranded, unable to even pay for a drink. The man who had accompanied her was clearly not willing to pay for her. He vanished the moment he realized the source of the money had dried up. That was the first crack in her castle of sand. Hours later, she called me again. This time, her voice broken, almost tearful. She begged me to at least send her money to come back, saying it had all been a mistake, that we could still fix things. I showed no compassion. I answered in the coldest voice I could muster. You destroyed everything yourself. You stay there with your decision. I don't rescue traitors. And I hung up again. The text messages that followed were a mix of pleas and empty threats. I didn't answer a single one. That night, I slept with a strange sense of calm. It was as if I had finally freed myself from a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. Knowing she was alone, trapped on an island without money and without her lover, gave me the certainty that the plan was working. This was just the beginning of her collapse. And the best part? I didn't even have to get my hands dirty. She was sinking all by herself, with every lie she tried to maintain, and every door that slammed shut in her face. My brother's message arrived in the early hours of the morning. The guy left the hotel. He left her alone, got in a taxi to the airport without a look back. It confirmed what I already suspected. Her lover was only interested as long as the card worked. My wife was stranded in paradise, with nothing but her own shame for support. The security cameras captured her in the lobby, arguing with the receptionist, demanding they extend her credit. My brother had ordered them not to give her a single cent. Receiving those images, I knew it was time for the second step: total disconnection. I removed her from all our joint accounts, changed passwords, and blocked her access to insurance and benefits. In parallel, my lawyer filed the request for legal separation based on infidelity with overwhelming proof, invoices, photos, and my own brother's testimony. Each document was another nail in the coffin of any attempt she might make to get financial compensation. But I wasn't satisfied with just the legal aspect. I decided to expose her double life publicly with a single post on social media, attaching the photos of her romantic getaway financed with my money. The mask fell. Within hours, dozens of acquaintances, friends, and even family members were sharing the post. She tried to defend herself, but the flood of comments was brutal. No one believed her. The blow to her reputation was immediate and devastating. Overnight, she went from presenting herself as an impeccable professional to being the unfaithful wife from the Hawaii trip. The counterattack didn't end there. The lover's wife, having found out through my post, contacted me. She thanked me for the evidence and took it straight to the human resources department of the company where they both worked. The betrayal not only destroyed our marriage, it shattered her professionally. They were accused of violating internal policies by engaging in a relationship during a fictitious business trip. In less than a week, she received her termination letter. While she was sinking, I was breathing easier. Every move she made was blocked. Every attempt to cling to her former status was demolished with evidence. For the first time in years, the scales were tipped in my favor. Not because I sought blind revenge, but because I had learned to use her own lies as a weapon. She was left without a lover, without money, without a reputation, and soon without a marriage. The day of her return was a scene I would have liked to witness in person, but my brother's messages were enough to savor it. She boarded an early morning flight with no luggage. The lover had left her to carry his things, then disappeared with them. She was dressed in the same wrinkled clothes she wore in the photos by the pool. The journey back was uncomfortable and silent. She couldn't even afford a coffee at the airport. Paradise had become a cage of shame. When she landed in our city, she found the first wall. The lock on our house had been changed. On the door, a plastic box awaited her with a sign taped to it that read, Your things are in storage. The ring no longer exists. The wedding ring, which she had flaunted at so many gatherings, I had sold. I donated the proceeds to a shelter for battered women. It was a clear symbol. Her betrayal deserved no memory, no relic. The messages began to flood my phone that same afternoon. They went from fury to pleading in a matter of hours. First insults, accusing me of ruining her life, then desperate pleas, begging me to talk to her for the sake of what we once were. I didn't reply to any of them. I saved every voicemail as a reminder of how low she had fallen. Hearing her cry, saying she had nowhere to stay, was confirmation that indifference was the most effective punishment. In parallel, her professional career was collapsing. A colleague of hers forwarded me an email. The company confirmed her dismissal and also stated that she was blacklisted from future employment within the same industry. Social media did the rest. Her personal accounts were shut down after an avalanche of ridicule and attacks. No one saw her as the sophisticated woman anymore, but as a living example of the cost of playing with fire. While she walked through the city with her dignity in tatters, I enjoyed a new silence at home. No fights, no excuses, no shadow of her contaminating every corner. I had lost everything she had taken from me with her lies: peace, respect, trust. Now, she was the one left with the ruins, and I simply refused to offer her a hand. It was her turn to sink in the humiliation she herself had sown. Several weeks passed before, after her relentless insistence, I agreed to see her. Not out of weakness, but because I needed to close the circle to her face, leaving no room for her to think there were any loose ends. I chose a downtown cafe, a public place, where her theatrics would be muted by the gaze of strangers. She arrived late, disheveled, with deep dark circles under her eyes and poorly applied makeup. She was not the woman I remembered. She was a withered version, almost unrecognizable, clinging to an old handbag that seemed to be the only thing of value she had left. When she sat down across from me, I could see she didn't know whether to smile or cry. I simply watched her in silence, waiting for her to dare to speak. She did, between ragged breaths. She admitted she had made a mistake, that she had been confused, that the other man was just a fleeting escape. Her words were the same ones I had already heard in calls and messages, but in person, they sounded even more pathetic. She apologized for using my money, for lying about the trip, for destroying the trust we had. She told me she still loved me, that we could try again, that nothing that had happened had to be final if I would just give her one last chance. Each sentence was like a rope she threw into the void, hoping I would catch it. I just looked at her, with the calm that comes from knowing you are on the right side of things. When she finished her speech, I took a sealed envelope from my briefcase. Inside was the final divorce decree, signed by the judge and stamped by the court. I slid it across the table, next to her untouched coffee. "It wasn't a mistake," I said. "It was selfishness. You knew what you were doing. You lied with premeditation. You used my money and thought I would never find out. This isn't a stumble. This is who you are." Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. When she read the first few lines, the tears began to fall. She tried to meet my gaze, as if searching for a spark of compassion. She found nothing. I simply left her there with the document. I reminded her of every detail: the photograph with her lover, the hotel receipts, the security footage of them holding hands. I described how my brother had seen her crying in the hotel lobby when her credit ran out, how her lover had abandoned her the moment the card was declined. I told her bluntly that I didn't hate her. To hate her, I would need to feel something, and I felt nothing at all. Indifference is all I have left for you, I said. I watched the words land, saw how they wounded her more deeply than any insult ever could. I didn't want her forgiveness or her redemption. I only wanted to make one thing clear: that to me, she no longer existed. She tried to prolong the meeting, speaking through sobs about old memories, past trips, nights filled with laughter, as if nostalgia could wash away what she had done. I stood up before she could finish. I left a few bills on the table to cover her coffee. "This is the last thing I will ever pay for you," I told her. I walked to the door without a single glance back. I could feel her eyes on my spine. The desperation of someone pleading for a second chance that would never come. Outside, the air tasted clean, as if that coffee had been the final exorcism of a ghost that no longer held any power over me. Months after that meeting, I heard through the grapevine that she had left the city. There was no formal goodbye, no public announcement. She simply vanished. She left with a single light suitcase, seeking a fresh start in a place where no one knew her story. Social media was no longer her refuge after the ridicule and the comments had shattered her. She deleted all her accounts, going from broadcasting every moment of her life to hiding in an enforced silence. I was told she tried to settle in another coastal town, renting a cheap room and surviving on odd jobs. The woman who once demanded luxury was now counting coins to pay a modest rent. Meanwhile, my own life took a different path. I began to focus on what I had neglected for years: my personal projects, my friendships, my own mental health. I discovered the value of sleeping without the shadow of suspicion haunting the bedside. I started laughing again with real friends, sharing dinners free of ulterior motives, feeling as though my time was my own once more. The divorce set me free, but what truly brought me peace was understanding that I had no need for a noisy revenge. My victory was watching her sink into the silence of her own choices. There were moments I wondered if I should feel pity. When a rumor reached me about her precarious situation, about how she was rejected from job interviews once they discovered her past, a flicker of doubt would surface. Was the punishment too severe? But that compassion would die the moment I remembered the nights she lied to my face without blinking, the moment I pictured her planning her trip with another man while I financed every detail. No, it wasn't too severe. It was pure consequence. Life was simply giving back what she had sown, and it wasn't my responsibility to save her. One day, while going through old emails, I found the folder where I had saved all the proof: the photos, the receipts, the screenshots. For the first time in a long while, I looked at them without anger. It was almost like reading someone else's case file, a story that no longer belonged to me. I decided to archive everything onto an external drive and put it away in a drawer. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed it at hand. The lessons from that betrayal were already tattooed on my memory. Never ignore the signs. Never justify the unjustifiable. And above all, never surrender control of your life to someone incapable of valuing it. Today, I live with a calm that once seemed impossible. I'm not saying there are no scars, but they are reminders of my strength, not my defeat. Sometimes I think the best revenge was just that, not shouting, not slamming my fist on the table, not actively seeking her suffering. My true revenge was rebuilding myself in silence, letting time and the truth speak for themselves, and proving to myself that I could be whole without her. My conclusion is simple. Indifference was the final blow, and my own personal success was the definitive tombstone on her betrayal.